Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
We may know what our strengths are, but if we don't take the time to invest in them and hone them, they can easily not be in their full use, and therefore we're not able to show up in our best possible way.
Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello, and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan, and this is my friend and co-host, Danelle.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Aries. How are you today?
Why do you say that?
Because
it's true.
It is true.
And
I'm not supposed to mention that your birthday is coming up soon.
Oh, well, there you go.
But you did say, you know what? I'm an Aries. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It is cool. And what else I think is fun is how the producer in New York just said, you're an Aries.
He called it. I don't
He
know
totally
how.
called it.
I don't know why that is.
I know. You said why. What'd he say?
Well, he didn't give me all the reasons, but I'm assuming I portray some very strong characteristics that align with the sun sign of Aries. So it's but I would call myself a pretty stereotypical Aries, that's for sure.
Yes.
Everything I read, I can relate to most of it. And we had this brief conversation the other day is I relate so much to the information about Aries as I do being a 7 on the Enneagram. And it's just interesting to me how aligned the characteristics, both positive and on the other end of the spectrum, align. So that I would be interesting to know if there were a study or anything out there about how many Enneagram 7s are Aries and vice versa. So it'd be interesting.
Well, I did a quick search before we got started just to see for people who don't care about horoscopes or don't look at that stuff. I thought, people might be driving right now and thinking or walking or whatever, thinking, what is an Aries? Like, what are traits of an Aries? Well, I'll tell you, listener, that's a very good question. Some of the traits of Aries are fiery. And I think that's what he said. I think he said, you're like a fireball.
Oh, okay.
Or something like that. Passionate, which you highly qualify for that. This is as of the Today Show or from the Today Show. High energy. You have no energy. No, I'm kidding. You have the most energy of anybody I know. I won't say this negative one. Determined, for sure. Confident, initiator, and courageous.
Awesome. Well, what's the negative one? Now I'm interested.
That one, the only negative one out of this list is domineering.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. I don't think many people in my life would argue on that.
Nobody's going to argue with me, but like, amen to that. Yeah. So anyway.
Oh, well, cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Happy birthday early.
Thank you. Yes, birthday's around the corner. And you know what today is as of this recording? And I'm not sure exactly when this episode's going to go live. But today marks the 6-month anniversary of my arrival into my New York residency. So
look at you. Does that make you officially a New Yorker, or does day one make you a New Yorker? I don't know.
I don't know. I've been lately, especially my daughter is like, Mom, you're becoming such a New Yorker. Apparently, I walk quite fast and a bit aggressive. And
the answer to that is yes. Apparently, no, confirmed.
Confirmed. But I don't know. I hope that I can be. I will always be a Texan. I'm a Texas girl at heart, but I do enjoy being in New York. And if that makes me a New Yorker, then so be it. Add it to my list of designations. So, but I can't believe it's been 6 months and it has flown by. I really can't believe it. So I've enjoyed every minute and we'll continue to be here for a bit. So,
well, if I'm being honest, you kind of lucked out because one, you decided to move to New York in a post-pandemic safer environment, where you could breathe and be close with a bunch of people, because it was really difficult to navigate places indoors during the pandemic.
Yep.
And I would say you had probably one of the milder winters
of recent on record. Like I forget what the number, like when the last time it was this mild, but, and I've mentioned it on several episodes. I finally did see snow last week, and the snow that was on the news that all of you saw who were blowing up my phone and checking in on me. Thank you. I appreciate that. But just so you know, I am prepared for when it does actually stick. I did not see a one flake on the ground. So, and now it was 62 degrees yesterday. So, I mean, anyway, but yes, I did absolutely luck out relative to coming here at a particular time where the city has certainly found its I don't know, its energy again. Mm-hmm. And certainly at a time when the weather cooperated during this particular winter. So I hope I don't jinx it and end up in 6 feet of snow next week. Oh, well, I'll be in Texas next week.
Not either.
Well, I won't be here. I'll be with you. It's in Texas.
That's right. So. That's true. You'll be here. And we'll be recording more for all of our listeners.
Yeah. Excited.
Another thing I'm excited about is today's topic, which is identifying our strengths. Mm-hmm. And we've got a couple of different avenues we're going to toss at our listeners today in terms of determining that and then what to do about that as leaders. But before we hop into that topic, let's jump to quick commercial.
As leaders, the time we have throughout the day is our most prized asset. At DMA, we work to save you time by doing marketing work that keeps you productive and focusing where your time is most needed. Right now, we're offering press release writing services to make sure that your news is shared with the right audience. As part of our service offering, we not only write and distribute the press release for you, we also follow up with key writers and editors to make sure your news is published. Once we're finished, we send you a full detailed report outlining the publications and audiences your press release reached. It's as simple as that. If I can help you or someone you know with press release writing, distributing, and publishing, look no further. Contact me, Lauren Miller, at info@dma-solutions.com.
Okay, so why is identifying our strengths as leaders important? For one, we often look to bring out strengths that we see in others. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes as leaders, we can tend to, I can speak for myself, put ourselves a bit on the back burner when it comes to developing and talking about and evaluating our own strengths. Mm-hmm. I think we should bring those strengths to the table when leading people, but also when leading business, leading ideas, leading charges that we're having to do on a daily basis. So first, today, we're going to talk about how to determine your strengths, especially if you're a bit seasoned, like my friend Danelle here. That's a joke.
Rude.
Joke. I know that was a really dig there.
Boy, that was a dig.
It's kind of funny. Now I'm going to do age jokes the whole time, guys. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to be funny. And she kind of likes it. And then finally, we're going to identify some ways to use the process and boil it down into stages. So just a little bit of content for you today. No big deal.
Yeah, I think it's important too. I think it's easy to rest on, especially if you're, again, to use Megan's almost rude word, but seasoned. Like if you've been in the leadership seat for a while, you probably instinctively already know areas where you're strong. And you probably know that because of the way it feels to do those particular things, or you just, you understand in the moment by looking at others that you have an easier time with that, whatever that strength may be. And then certainly I hope some of it has come from feedback from others, and we're going to talk more about that. But when we're talking about strengths, I think there are so many tools out there that we can also use, and that's some of the things that we want to elevate, because I think that just thinking you know what your strengths are isn't necessarily, in my opinion, what we need to be doing as leaders. We need to identify what they are, and again, we're going to give you several ways to do that. But then do what the most important part of that is honing those strengths. And, in this journey that I've been on in this 50th year of my life, and certainly with the last 6 months living here in New York, strength is something that I have found a whole new level, or I don't even know if the word's level, but I found a whole new experience looking at my strengths, because it was necessary. It was necessary in so many ways in my life. And so this is a bit of a reflective episode for me as well, too. So I really enjoyed preparing for it, because it reminded me that we we may know what our strengths are, but if we don't take the time to invest in them and hone them, they can easily not be in their full use, and therefore we're not able to show up in our best possible way. So if we're talking about strengths, let's loosely describe them, and then I want to share with you a description that I find to be very powerful. But loosely, they are, it's something that you practice, you become good at. Compared to others, you may have a skill where you can easily identify that is a strong suit of yours. So, and it's honestly where you thrive. It's also, strengths are something you find enjoyable enough that you might do it for an extended amount of time. I mean, you fill in the blank, but I'm talking years. Like, this is something that isn't something you're good at for a moment. It's something that you're able to stick with. And it's broad enough that it can be used both professionally and personally, if you're thinking about a true innate strength of yours. And then again, and I already mentioned this, but it's stable enough that it won't change year to year. So it is part of who you are. And one of the tools that we've used, and we've spoke about it on this podcast before, but is Strength Finders. And I'm sure most people who are listening to this podcast are familiar with the tiny little book that packs a punch. And it's actually called something else now. I think it's called CliftonStrengths. It used to be called Strength Finders, but they've evolved it. And the founder of this is Don Clifton. I love the way he defines strength. He describes the science of a strength as a simple formula: your talent plus the investment of your time. So when he says talent, it's the natural way of thinking and feeling and behaving. So again, it's what's innate and inside of us. Investment is the time spent practicing, developing your skills, and building your knowledge base. So again, talent plus investment equals strength. And the strength is the ability to consistently provide consistent performance in a specific area or with a specific task. So I really like that. Obviously, I'm visual, and they have a beautiful visual of that on the website, which we'll provide a link to. And also, just to remind you, if you have taken Strength Finders, and to invite you to do so, this assessment again is online. We'll provide the link. What happens when you go through the assessment is that you receive what they call talent themes, and there's 34 of them. So this Don Clifton, this researcher, he found hundreds of different descriptors of the way that you could describe someone. And he categorized them into these 34 themes. And then he further categorized them into 4 domains. And where we have found the most success using Strength Finders as a team, and then obviously we're talking about as in a leadership capacity today, but as a team, what you can do is have everyone take the test, and then you can organize it by your top 5 strengths, because we all possess all 34, some aspect of 34, but it's in order from your strongest all the way down to the ones where you have less dominance in. And what we did is we organized our top 5 by the 4 domains, and the 4 domains being executing. So again, these are themes that help you make things happen is when you have a talent that falls into executing. The second one is influencing, themes that help you take charge, speak up, and make sure others are heard. The third one is relationship building. These are themes that help you build strong relationships that hold a team together. And then strategic thinking is the 4th one, and it's themes that help you absorb and analyze information that informs better decisions. So it's interesting. I think most people take the test, are like, what are my top 5 strengths? I found that to be extremely valuable. And we studied actually our top 10 as a team. But then when you think about it in these domains, it becomes extremely interesting, especially as you're looking at, I used it for the leadership team that now is running our company. And what I thought would be interesting is to share our top 5 with our listeners, and then talk about how the revelations that we have. So starting with Megan, her top 5 are strategic, relator, achiever, futuristic, and positivity. I'm sure none of those are a surprise to many of you, because your strengths should not only be easily identified by you, but then also of others that you work with, or others that you in your life. And so I'm not surprised by these results. And then my top 5 are command, activator, communication, strategic, and self-assurance. And I hope that those aren't too big of a surprise to those in my life. What I will say that we found so interesting, if you're looking at these top 5 strengths of ours, again, we're a leadership combo here, team. When you're looking at our top 5, 4 of my top 5 are in influencing, and 1 is in strategic thinking, whereas Megan possesses 2 in strategic thinking, 2 in relationship building, and 1 in executing. And so what I think that it's, if you look at the 2 of us, well, obviously I have extremely strong talents that reside in the influencing domain. You're a little bit more well-rounded. And that being said, I think because they're so different, we don't even possess any of the same top 5. And
okay. Yeah. Strategic, we do. You're number 4.
You're right.
Which is
thanks.
good.
Yeah,
Which
correct. That's my number 4, and that's your number 1. So yes, but mostly they're different. And I think that's what makes us unique and makes us a stronger team, is the differences that we possess, because we can really accentuate each other in that way, or support each other in that way. So I just find these, and I wanted to share it with the team, because I think most people just take the test, and we did the 2, and when you just look at your top 5 and you read about your top 5 and you move on. But there's just more depth to this using the domains. And then they also have another assessment. So once you take the Strength Finders, you can pay an additional fee, and they will give you the leadership for Strength Finders, or strengths for leaders. And they don't change from your personal to your professional. They just organize the information for you a bit differently, and they give you what they call a leadership DNA. So I invested in it. I spent the extra $50 and had the assessment. And what it does, it breaks down to your top 10 of your strengths, and it applies it to leadership. I found it to be pretty exceptional, because what it did was it talked about how to use your strengths. But what I also loved is it talked about what to watch for, because we all know that our strengths can easily become our derailers. And so they talk about that. And so it's just very helpful information. So that's, again, if we're teeing up strengths, that is where we have found the most benefit, is looking at them through the lens of the Clifton Strength Finders. So
just since both of us had strategic thinking as one of our top 5, I think it'd be interesting. I'll share what I found, just to give people a little taste. You're going to have to do it for yourself relative to Strength Finders. And then you're going to have to pay the extra, like Danelle said, to do the leadership strengths. But let me just tell you a revelation, since both of us have strategic thinking. So they say in the report, because strategic is one of our top, where others see roadblocks, we see options to explore. Where others see one path, we see many. We take time to consider each of these options and to find a way forward with the greatest potential for success, which is 100% true. And should things change, which you likely anticipated already, you can quickly pivot to an alternate path. So they tell you about your position as a leader relative to that strength. And I don't disagree with any of that for you and me.
Neither do I. Yeah.
The challenge with that is, it says you may offer too many solutions to a problem, and others might hear too many alternatives as you communicate a future direction. They just want to know the best choice for moving forward. I mean, literally, the report says that. Stability is important to people, and too many options can feel unsettling when what they want to hear is where the organization is headed and why. And fill in the blank for organization. It could be the project, the goal, the whatever, but people just want to hear the plain truth, right? And I know you are able to discern all the ideas, because you too are strategic, and you can see the light. You can see the one that looks the best, but others who don't have the strength can't. And it's just confusing. So I think it's telling me, come at bigger discussions, just plain and simple. Give your options, but give it to them in a way that's very easy for them to understand, and that there's a clear path for any way that you go.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I agree with all of this. And I through the years, I had to learn knowing that this was, part of what I possess as a strength is the fact that I am able to see forward. I am able to see solutions, but there's another part of me that deeply cares about what other people think. And I would oftentimes like to lead by committee. And that caused a lot of frustration, especially when we found out, and we've referenced this other assessment that we work with called the Working Genius, that we had a team of primarily tenacious people. Well, they possessed tenacity as their genius. They wanted to just get things done, and I wanted to think about it, and I wanted to wander and ponder. Like literally, those are my two top things, my top geniuses. So it's just interesting when you take what I would characterize this is that it's a bit of a deeper dive of your strengths, and it's applicable to your leadership style. And I think that's what makes I don't know how long they've had this leadership version, but anyway, I find it's very detailed. So there's just a lot to work with there, but I think it's worth the $50. So
it is. I learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it was more validating, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I continue to have that problem. So if you think that about yourself, like, why don't people listen to me, or why don't they activate? Or, I do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It told me a lot.
Right.
So highly recommend it.
And I think we are proponents of purchasing assessments, and we love them when they're free, but we don't also mind investing. We have a whole line item for development of our people in many different ways, certainly as marketers, but as individuals. And what we want to offer is certainly recommending that particular assessment for you, but we also want to give you some strategies for identifying your strengths without that, like doing the homework yourself without taking an assessment or a test. So that's what we want to dive into today, relative to giving you all actionable, applicable content for thinking about your strengths. You want to kick us off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So getting started like this, these are just things, as Danelle said, sans an assessment, someone telling you exactly what it is going on. These are just nice, easy railways. I guess I almost imagine like a roadway, a railway, like a direction for you to go. So first and foremost, slow and steady is okay when it comes to identifying your strengths. Remember, you have a longer runway than you think when it comes to your long-term career. I think we graduate from college and we think we're supposed to run the business.
Right.
I know I think I felt that way, but then once I got into the business, I was like, wait a minute, I need to pump the brakes on this, and learn. But I don't know, just leading people, I see that sometimes. And what we want you to know is that identifying your strengths just takes time. So just be patient, dear 20-somethings, 30-somethings, even teenagers, even 40s. I'm in my 40s and I figured out a lot relative to, my strengths and also my weaknesses and opportunities, but I'm not stopping. So I think we have a point where we have to be aware of, okay, these are my strengths. Got it. This keeps repeating, to your point earlier, 10 years plus. Now what? Now, how am I going to lean into that? So during this time of exploration for yourself, we recommend that you live your life and work to identify your strengths and how you're evolving to help guide you. And then just keep going deeper into that.
Yeah, because I think it goes back to the definition that I shared with you, is that identifying is part of it. But what you're speaking to at this moment is the honing of it.
Yes.
And in the way I see it, that's a constant. You should be constantly honing the things that you know, and it should bring you joy because you know that you're good at it and you want to continue to find ways to be good at it. And again, referencing comments that we make on here all the time, through different seasons of your life, through ups and downs, you're going to need to utilize those strengths to help you navigate whatever it may be that you're facing at the time. And I know for me, I had to really look at where do you gain the most, like where are you strongest, because you need that strength to make this change, these different changes, especially relating to you running the business, I mean, that was a significant change for me. And I had to think about my strengths and your strengths. And so it slow and steady is the way it should be, because it should just be, it's part of your identity, right?
Yeah.
We talked a lot about identity in the episode where we covered the book Atomic Habits, but this is part of that. Your strengths are part of your identity. Therefore, it's not you find it out, you know it, and you move on. It should be something that you're utilizing.
And I think for you and I both, just to close this one quickly, is in our 40s, and we're still growing and we're still aging, thank God. But for you and me, I know that you had an awakening in your 40s. I did too. And part of that awakening was, wait a minute, like we didn't know. Sometimes your strengths aren't things you can buy in an assessment.
No.
Like I remember the day that I think I talked to you and I was like, I think I'm like good under pressure. Like I remember realizing that in my 20s, I thought I hated pressure. When in fact, I noticed, wait a minute, I execute pretty well when we're under pressure. So maybe that's a strength of mine. I don't necessarily always love it, but what I love is the end. I love that I feel like I've gone the extra mile, even though it was a shorter runway potentially to get there because it's under pressure. But we figured out some things like that in our 40s. You would say things like, I really don't like that. I don't like the way that made me feel. I don't like the way that you approach that, or that I approach that, or whatever. And it was like exploration. So just can't underline that enough. Give yourself a little patience, dear listener, to grow into yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into the second recommendation that we have, is to lean into things that give you energy and joy. This is basically what you're describing. And because typically those are the things that you can do very well. And to your point is figure out what doesn't feel like work and find a way to get paid for it in this particular instance. But, be nice for that. But it's also find out what doesn't feel not just like work, that's in reference to, our professional sense, but in our personal life, like doesn't feel like work in the relationships that you have, like what comes naturally for you. For some of us, that's listening. For some of us, asking thoughtful questions. So curiosity, there's multiple, ways to look at that. But and one of the recommendations is there's this exercise that we found, and I haven't tried this yet. Did you do this? This energy audit? Okay. Anyway, I'm going to give it a try, but I totally forgot to do it in preparation for this episode. But we found an energy audit, and it's a 3-step process that involves looking at your calendar over the past 2 weeks. And then for each activity that you had on there, and this could be your task list too. It doesn't necessarily have to be your calendar, but what brought you the most energy and what drained you? I really like that. Again, for some of us, it wouldn't be our calendar because mine's kind of blank these days. I don't put a lot on my calendar, but I still have my weekly to-do list and my monthly to-do list, so I could do it with that.
Yes.
And then you could look for patterns that are in these tasks that you found energizing and identify them and look for commonalities. And I mean, I think if you kept your to-do list or your calendar over time, this would be a great exercise to really just for yourself assess, did I really enjoy doing that? And did that bring me joy? Or did that really that task or that meeting, whatever it may be, did I not enjoy that? And trying to really understand why that is. So again, we'll put a link in the show notes for probably a much better description of how we can give ourselves or how we can participate in an energy audit. But I think it's something that we should take a look at because, again, it's not just what we love to do. It's the other stuff too, because we need to work on both as leaders.
You have to work on both, yeah.
As leaders, yeah.
And I just want to say, I think you and I have been doing this. So I did take the energy audit and I was like, well, actually, I have set up this role to be, I think I got here through energy. And I think now that I'm here, I feel the energy. So I don't have anything I need to slough off or drain right now. Like nothing drains me. Like I love everything that I do. And I don't know if that's because of the role or the attitude or maybe a little bit of both, but all I do here is what I love. Does that make sense? So I feel very lucky.
Well, I don't think that happened by accident. I think it's because you've been going through this process and we in this organization have done our damnedest to create an environment and a culture where people are able to identify what brings them joy and energy and what drains them. Now, sometimes we don't get to quit doing what drains us, but we can find different ways to
That's right.
share that experience with someone that maybe could help us have a different perspective. I remember your favorite thing wasn't financials. Your favorite thing was not working with the money side of our business. I think some of that came from a bit of vulnerability. Like you just didn't see yourself as being good at that. I think you're fantastic at it now. And what I really like about your approach to that aspect of our business is you see things differently than I do. Now the numbers are the numbers, so there's no funny business going on with the numbers.
No.
But the way you create your own, I don't know. Spreadsheets is such a set, but when you're working with the numbers, it's just interesting to see you light up, and when you get excited about it, and you're intentional with it. So again, I think the reason why you're not finding much that drains you about your work is because you're continuously doing the work as a leader and as a professional, and quite frankly, as a friend, mom, wife, fill in the blank, to identify those things about yourself and be okay with the other piece of that, identify the parts that do kind of drain you and be able to communicate that, but then also take responsibility for finding new ways to potentially make a task or something that you have to do less draining. Again, most of the time that's a mindset. And also it can also be putting in the time to get better at it. So again, it goes back to the investment of time.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it.
Good, because tank's empty. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it's actually the perfect segue for the next one, which is get feedback from people you work with and in your personal life. So you just did that. You gave me feedback without us planning for it, but you did, and I'll take it. Behaviors like negativity, bias, whether conscious or unconscious, can make us blind. And we know that. It makes us blind to our own strengths. So asking others is one of the most useful ways to learn about ourselves. Questions. I just have some questions here that, pick your own, but here's some questions you might ask someone. Again, someone you trust, and you're going to respect the response they give you. Questions like, when do you see me in my most energized and happy self? Like when? And you just said it. You're right. I love numbers now. Didn't love numbers before. Love numbers now. That's all I want to do. I don't have that luxury of playing in numbers and finding money, but I love to play in numbers and find money. When I'm at my best, this is a question you might ask. When I'm at my best, what am I doing? So what do you see behaviorally, but then physically, what am I doing? Am I cooking? Am I skateboarding? God love you if you are skateboarding, but you know what I mean? Ask them, what are you doing? Some things that people might say to a leader would be, you're speaking to a group. You're delivering a presentation. You're giving me one-on-one feedback. You do that really well and very comfortably, so hearing those answers can vary from work to home. Another question, what are your 3 favorite qualities you see in me? That one's a little pointed. I mean, I could see somebody asking me that here. I really could, but we're so close here at DMA. Like if someone's searching for this, they're going to ask me this. They know I'm going to give them the answer.
And I think too, like for our organization, and again, we've spoke about this many, many a time, is that is part of the process. If you're thinking about the CTI meetings that everyone has with Hannah, our director of people, which happens monthly, weekly one-on-ones can include some of this work as well. But then we have progress plans and development plans that happen happen quarterly. So those are times where people in our organization can reflect on their strengths and receive that type of feedback. That should also be a time where the leaders in those progress plans and development plans could ask the same question of the person who's receiving it. So it's just getting in the habit of asking people in your life to help you identify some of these things and using their unique lenses to your own benefit, because you may see a strength in me in one way because of our, super connected relationship, but maybe someone else who's less connected with me in the organization might see something else. Totally. So I think that is, again, it's critically important, and that you create the environment for this type of exchange.
100% at home and at work. Sure.
Correct.
Listen to, episode 54, we just recently published this. It's feedback versus feed forward. Listen to that, because a lot of what we're talking about here is feed forward.
Correct. So the fourth one that we are sharing with you, and again, we'll put the summarized list in the show notes so that you have it, but it's when you think about your strengths, go big. And it would probably be easy to convince yourself that you're still all of the things that, you realize that you were good at since you were a child, and you kind of stop there. And that's what we're advising you not to do here, is that in some of those examples could be you're sweet or kind or generous. And, like me, mine was always, oh, you're so self-confident. You're so whatever. And I mean, I could have rested. You're so extroverted, and they would mean that most often in a great way. And I've talked about it before, is that I thought leaders were born until I realized they weren't, because I was always considered a leader. But what I really was more, energetic, or I was self-confident. And so I think it's this particular, when you think about going deeper with what there's two parts. It's the strengths that you already know that you possess that you should want to be even better at, and learn more about those and how those relate to people in your professional and personal life. But then it's also working on other areas that you need to possess to be successful in all of your relationships. And one of the things that we can, advise here too is kind of taking a look at your reputation at work or in your personal life. And it's the genesis of this podcast was that I possessed all of these strengths that helped make this company initially successful in our early years. And then I got the 26 approval rating as a leader. And that meant that I'd only been relying on a set of strengths that took us so far, but I hadn't even cared or been aware. Maybe I would have cared. I did care, obviously, once I found out. But once I became aware, I dove into other areas of strengths that I knew I needed to possess. And maybe they just weren't, they were more dormant, meaning they were there. I just had to learn to hone them. I'm a curious person, but I wasn't asking the right questions of the team at the time. So we weren't, I wasn't coming off as being as connected as I needed to be or effective as I needed to be. So I think, again, the fourth one being invest the time to identify the strengths that you're aware of, but then also work to identify those that might be dormant or just you haven't explored before.
Or people don't even realize you have them. Like,
yeah,
if I'm showing up at work and everybody thinks I'm the friendliest, which is probably the case, or it was at one point, I was thinking to myself, was I always the friendliest when we went to a trade show? Probably not. You know why? Because I was learning and I was quiet and I was watching you and absorbing. So I had to look for a way to be consistent in my behavior at work, at home, and outside of these walls so that my authenticity was sharpened. So I think, I guess that's a good question for this one is, maybe it's when you think about your strengths go big, are you being authentic? Are you stretching those strengths beyond in here as a leader? I wouldn't ask someone who's just getting started on their leadership journey to do this. You really have a lot to figure out relative to your style and who you are as a person. But once you start to figure those things out and work on this, do this work that we're talking about, then you need to consider how you're showing up to others that matter in your life. So, in my 20s,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, you and me both in our 20s, we had access to executive CEO. We weren't CEOs ourselves or presidents or, these roles that we're in now, but we had access to executive leadership of the organizations that we worked for. Was I bringing my strengths to the table every time I met with those executives? I can tell you for me, the answer was no. I was a whole different person. I was like a robot or something. I had to learn how to be okay with my strengths and teach them how to be okay with my strengths.
It's interesting that you would say that too, because I think to summarize all of that is that to realize we are who we are. And it's important to recognize how we're showing up in different contexts or in different environments. And I think that's where, I don't know how it's happened in our culture, but relative to work, it's as if we were taught you're supposed to show up differently in differently in the work environment than you do personally. And I just don't believe that. I think that has been something that has, again, I don't know how that took shape. But I don't think that is, because we should be able to use our strengths and we should be able to show up as ourselves in our unique ways in both contexts. Now, to use your example, in our 20s, us showing up into a boardroom and, owning the conversation probably wouldn't have served us well. But if we both possess, like, command is my number one strength. I really didn't like that when I first read it. I'll be honest with you. But when I learned about command also means that I possess a particular strength in being able to take a group of people and make sure everyone's heard and get everyone in the room to contribute to the vision or the project. So not only was I trusted in relative to, I could command a room to hear me. I have a certain presence that, people want to, for whatever reason, for at least for a minute, hear what I have to say. Yes. That is a strength of mine. And what I've learned, part of the strength that I possess relative to command is helping others with that particular endeavor of speaking up. If just to, summarize it a bit easier, but I have the ability to do that. And when I thought about command in that broader context, I was able to say, wait a minute, okay, I see where that strength possesses in me.
Absolutely.
I want to lean into it more so. So again, when you're looking at who you are and what you naturally possess, I think it's important to look at it from different points of view or in different environments or different times, because then it broadens that strength instead of keeping it almost in this narrow context. So,
and maybe that's when atomic habits start to form. Maybe if it's like the same principle. I am the kind of person who, if let's make it easy, command. I am the kind of person who can command in the way that's helpful to people. Then I must be that all throughout. Like that's who I am.
Right.
And so I'm not going to compartmentalize that for work or personal. I'm going to do it always.
Correct. Yeah. It's a good way to summarize that. Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess that kind of leads to the next one, which is combine and compound your strengths. So for me, this has come in the form of turning a weakness in careful confrontation. I say careful confrontation.
Confrontation. Yeah. Yeah.
And I've turned it from a weakness, I know you like to say opportunity, into a strength. So I've learned how to combine my strength of leadership into careful confrontation again, which took me years of practice, years of wanting to bite my nails and hide under my desk, literally like crippling fear of it, to now I can't wait to do it because I trust myself.
Right. And the great news about that is that you won't lose that. Like you'll take that with you for the rest of your life. And because you did the hard work to face it, and you turned it into a strength of yours because you possess things naturally in you that will make you be someone who can turn a confrontational moment into a carefrontation. We have a whole episode on that. But you had to work at it because it made you so uncomfortable at the thought of having an opposing opinion to someone or having to deliver some news that could incite something aggressive in someone else, probably namely, I'm sure I'm on that top of that list for you, as is Aaron, your husband.
Yes.
And
thank you, God. You read my mind. Yes.
And you had to learn how to do that for yourself. But also the reason why you're so successful at it now too is because you've taken the time to also get to know those that you're working with. And that would obviously, the two of us in your life would be among the top of that list. So I think that is critically important. It is realizing that we have innate strengths, but if we want to be stronger at something, we can. I don't know that I have the innate strength of listening. I don't believe that I do, but I made a decision as a part of this leadership journey I've been on the last 9 years, is that listening had to be something I became better at. And it's interesting because newer people in my life, people that I've gotten to know in the recent years, I have received feedback from them that says, you're a good listener. You ask a really thoughtful question.
You're compounding it.
I can promise you I wasn't 10 years ago.
No.
I wasn't. Yeah. And then I also think being the type of person, so being the type of mother that has a significantly powerful connected relationship with her daughter, that was my goal. Like that's an identity I wanted to possess. I had to learn to listen. I had to learn to listen. And so that's what I want to encourage our listeners to with as part of this, again, this part of the work that we're doing as leaders is to, first and foremost, don't go too hard on yourself. Secondly, think broader than just having a list of 3 or 4 things that you're good at that's kind of easy. Like,
right.
Let's take this a bit further because that's what we need to do as leaders. And again, you said at the top of the podcast, typically we're looking to hone strengths in others as leaders. And what we're suggesting in this episode, and the reason why we did a whole episode on it, is because we are suggesting that we need to go back as leaders and do this work and take it deeper and be more thoughtful with it and conscious about it.
Yes. Something else that's interesting about strengths when we were researching for this episode, Wikipedia, which, love it or hate it, it is what it is, but provided results. And we learned that there's I don't know if it's pronounced VIA or VIA, the VIA inventory of strengths, formerly known as the values and action inventory. And I mean, if you go do a strength, anything research on the Google, this is what you're going to get.
Okay.
This is a proprietary psychological assessment that measures, it just is designed to identify an individual's profile of character strengths.
Okay.
So their description, and they had the list there of the classifications of strengths. Will you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. So they have them in basically 6.
Yes.
I can't remember if they call them, I guess these are classifications. So there's 6 of them. First and foremost being wisdom and knowledge. So some examples of that would be creativity, curiosity, judgment, love of learning, perspective. The second one is courage. So that could be bravery, perseverance, honesty, zest. Humanity is the third one. Examples would be love, kindness, social intelligence. The fourth one is justice. Teamwork, fairness, leadership would fall under that classification. The fifth one is temperance. And that is forgiveness, humility, prudence, and self-regulation. And the sixth one being transcendence. So appreciation of beauty and excellence, gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality would fall under that classification. So again, the 6 classifications being wisdom and knowledge, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And we'll include the link to this particular assessment and also these 6 classifications because, again, there's a lot of overlap that we've learned in these particular exercises or assessments that can help us truly identify our strengths. And I would hope for everyone listening to this podcast that your list is lengthy and but of course, understanding, and I would almost put them in the things that you know to be true about your strengths. Also, I would have it'd be interesting to have a section where others, feedback that you've gotten from others that you trust, as Megan has said, but then also aspirational strengths, things that you want to get better at, and identify those and learn and study those as much as the things that you already know that you're good at. Because I think that's necessary as we develop in our leadership journey.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I loved about the list that you just read off was, in comparison to what we talked about at the top of the episode, which was our sort of rocks in terms of who we are, you and me, the top 5. And those are like, I literally visualize a rock. These are a little bit more fluffy. These are a little bit more human nature kind of, this isn't calling out anything in particular about you personally. This is calling out, what is your character like?
Yeah, this is more psychological.
Yes. And so just to shape the difference there, I think this is an assessment you can take as well. We haven't taken it, just for full disclosure, but wow, where do you fall up underneath this category? But this is, just 2 different ways of looking at when you're talking about leading people and you're talking about bringing strengths to the table when leading. These are both very good things to take a look at.
Yeah. And I love this quote that is part of the Clifton work, is that great leaders don't have a specific set of strengths that make them better than the rest. The greatest leaders are the ones who understand how to use their unique strengths to advocate for those they lead and create a successful organization. So your strengths at the end of the day should be about your service to others, to include yourself. So if you think of leadership as service, and if you believe and subscribe to that, then knowing your strengths is a critical part. And I think some people who possess a little bit of false humility or oh shucks kind of mentality, and we can all be guilty of that. When we use our strengths and we think about them in the context of being in service to others, that's what should make this particular type of audit of insight of yourself and work with others, why it should be important.
Yummy. Thank you.
Yummy. Are you hungry?
I am. That was good. I'm hungry for more words.
Okay. Well.
And music. I'm hungry for that. Actually, I'm thirsty for music. I'm hungry for words.
Okay. All right.
Let's transition and talk about music.
Yay.
You and I are, I don't want to use the word obsessed, but slightly obsessed with the show. You're further along than I am. There's a show on Amazon Prime that we're watching. You're watching it in New York. I'm watching it in Dallas, and I'm behind, but I'm in love with it. What's it called?
Daisy Jones and the Six. And Mackie Payton recommended it. And I mean, not just a soft recommendation. Like, Mom, there is a must-see TV show, and she knows what's going to follow that, a bit of an eye roll. I'm not good with television shows. There's a few I like, but I prefer documentaries. I prefer, I don't know, more probably to the rest of the world, a little bit more boring, educational type stuff. I don't know what it is. I am excited because Ted Lasso is back out. But there's just a few shows that I really do enjoy. But this, and she knew it. She knew why, and she told me to tell you as well. And she knew. And so what this show is it's loosely based on Fleetwood Mac. So the band Fleetwood Mac and their particular album Rumors. Like but it's not said that for sure, but you just can't help it. The analogies, the parallels, the story, the music. Yeah. And so what I love about it, and I'd like to know what you think so far, I think there's going to be 10 episodes, and I don't know if it's going to end after that. Like, I don't know if there's going to be another season, but I just know that in this season there's 10 episodes, and I've seen 8 of them. And what I like about the show is, of course, the music. And there's 2 things about the music. It's music that that was happening during that time. So it's set in the 70s. So it's music you would recognize. but then they're also creating their own music. So there's all this original music. And I went on Spotify this morning and they have all of it. So it's fun to, I would probably advise, I've decided I'm not going to listen to the Spotify roundup because there's a radio version. There's multiple ways that you can listen to this music, but I want to make it through all of the episodes because with every episode, new songs they're showing you new songs.
Spoil it.
Right. So I love that. So music by far. But what I also love, and I'd be interested for your take on this, is that I didn't recognize any of the actors or actresses, none of them. And so that's been fun for me, is to see all of these new faces and new talent. But the one that plays the lead, the one that's the quote unquote Stevie Nicks character,
Daisy Jones, yes.
Daisy Jones, yeah, the namesake of the show, duh. I kept staring at her and going, why do I recognize her? So
I mean, stop.
Tell me why. Tell our listeners why.
Okay. Well, I just want to say this. She has there's a certain trait of her that is very similar to an iconic rock star. And it's Elvis Presley. And I kept looking at her mouth, and I grew up listening to Elvis Presley. Okay, y'all. My mother is a super fan, like,
we've talked about it several times. Yeah.
Okay. So I've been looking at pictures of Elvis Presley and seeing him since I was born. So I saw this mouth on this girl and I was like, oh my God, she's got Elvis's mouth, which sometimes people might because of the way they sing or whatever. Well, sure enough, she is Elvis Presley's granddaughter. She's Lisa Marie Presley's daughter. Her name is Riley. I forget her last name, but my mother knew it right away.
Yeah.
Worse, shocking.
Yes. And I thought it was the eyes, but you saw it. But I was like, there's just this familiar air. Like I couldn't put my finger on it. And Mac and I were having dinner the other night and I mentioned that. She goes, oh, Mom, that's Elvis Presley's granddaughter. And then she went into this whole saga about what's going on with the family between her and her grandmother. And it's actually really sad. So if you want to get some dish on famous people and what they go through, just Google it. But that makes me sad. But I'm telling you, the show is so good. And so is the cinematography. It's almost shot in the sepia tone. It's so gorgeous and highly, 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 highly recommend.
Those of you who are alive in the 70s that are listening, for me, it's just fun to see the clothes and like the cars and the things that they use in everyday life. I'm like, we had that. We had those coffee mugs.
Yes.
We had that bag of Cheetos. Like everything was differently branded. So from a marketing perspective, it's really interesting. But I noticed a lot, even the baby blanket. I was like, I think I had that baby blanket. But anyway, it's neat to watch.
It's
Please
fantastic.
get yourself some of that.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all for being here with us today. We're so grateful. Remember, we're going to have lots of things in the show notes for you today. Remember to tell a friend. Thank you for that in advance. And until next week, we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
And goodbye, everyone.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming self-smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.